This conference will now be recorded.
Told me to do 3 days. And that's,
I got one over here. Two. I break the wall.
Mike's picture was up there a while ago.
Oh,
He was doing wave with himself.
Anybody else online there? Right.
no, it's just us here in the room and me. It's like we're the only ones online so far.
Okay, we'll go ahead. Good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone to the May 24th, 2022 Planning and Zoning. Roll call.
Lane,
Here.
Templin,
Here.
Manson,
Present.
Schultz. Here. Fisher.
Here.
Milborn.
Here.
Motion carries. Or all are present, excuse me. I was just doing meetings. man. 2 seconds
German?
ago.
General business. Item A, approve planning commission agenda.
Make a motion we approve the planning commission agenda for May 24th.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. Item B, approve minutes of the planning commission meeting held on April 26, 2022. Everybody happy with the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes. Item C, disclosure, conflict of interest. Do we have any? None?
None.
Item D, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. Do we have any?
No.
Good. Call to the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so at this time. Any presentation is for information purposes only. No action will be taken. There's a 4-minute time limit. Do we have anybody, Mike?
Nobody online.
Close the call to public. Public hearing, number 5. This has been an open public hearing meeting, and I think, Brad, you're going to talk about that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the location of the proposed Taco Bell site plan is no longer on the Taco Bell site, it's moved to the Jake's site. And because when I noticed the initial public hearing, I specifically said it was going to be on the Taco Bell location and use that address. So I have to go back and renotice and hold the public hearing. So this is actually a totally new public hearing. So I'm suggesting we just close this public hearing and then it just goes away. The June meeting will have a public hearing on the new site. Everything is staying the same about content, what's on the sign, the 2 signs, the Taco Bell, the Jake sign, height, everything. However, the location is a different spot, so I'm suggesting close the public hearing on the proposed Taco Bell location. That would be that. But I think we do need to officially close the public hearing since it's still an open agenda item.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that, Mike?
Yeah, yes, you do.
I'll make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Schultz,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Manson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Old business, we have no old business. New business, discuss potential future land use updates for the southwest growth area. Brad?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This will be something that we will be diving into quite a bit over the next several years, most likely. As you know, the annexation of the Sunflower properties occurred. They will be bringing forth a rezoning application sometime soon, probably the next month or two. Initially, it's for the 600 acres, I guess, it's in the northeast sort of corner of the, along Lexington Road, and 103rd Street. We will change that to light industrial, which we do have shown on the land use plan. Also, what was adopted last summer was the Southwest Growth area, and we do need to kind of talk about that a little bit as well, so we can bring you something. But we want to get your input on sort of the future of what we've got shown, what kind of additional thoughts that you might have. And Mike and I were pretty focused on just the industrial growth, the M1, M2, what's going to happen there. It's a little bit tied to the next item we have on the agenda about potential battery factory coming to DeSoto. But when we brought this topic up to the council, they also wanted to put a strong emphasis on having the planning commission involved in talking about housing, where potential workers from these areas could reside within DeSoto. And when we updated this last summer, I think Roger, you made a comment about adding a little bit of R1 along Edgerton Road on the north side of K10. It goes fairly close to the sewer line down to the plant on Sunflower. But really, that was the only little bit of discussion we had on housing. As we know, housing is on short supply, not just, we talk a lot about workforce housing, sort of entry-level housing, but it's really across the board on a lot of levels. There's just a shortage. And where do we want to provide that, or how can we provide it, or do we want to provide it? And where can it go, and where can we really feel like there's some appropriate locations? You know, DeSoto's terrain is rather tough. There's a lot of rocky ground. There's not a lot of easy flat spots, and then it's compounded by the fact that the river to the north, Merck in that large complex, Lexington Lake Park to the west, and then far to the east, there's no sewers, and then there's a large block of land owned by JAA Farms, which sort of is a stopping point. So we're kind of hemmed in a little bit on the northern part of K10. So really what we have to look at is, especially housing, is what do we want to do in this sort of quadrant? Maybe we can talk about housing on the Sunflower property as well. You see the purple areas we've got shown as mixed use, and really that means we don't have a good idea. It could be pretty much anything. And we also show a fair, which is the purple on the map up there. We also show a fair amount of commercial retail. And as we know, the world is changing. People aren't shopping at stores anymore. They're shopping on computers and having stuff delivered. So does that area, could that be translated into housing? Some of those areas along Lexington. And especially the area that I kind of think about is that Sunflower and where Lexington curves into 103rd. I mean, that used to be all housing for base right in there. Of course, now a lot of those houses are spread all over DeSoto, and see them in Gardner, I've seen them in Spring Hill, there's some in Olathe that have been picked up and moved. But at one time that was all housing for employees that worked in Sunflower plant. And the other thing I was talking to Chairman about this last Friday was, you know, up to the 50s and 60s, and even in the early 70s, there were 10, 15,000 people working at that Sunflower plant. There's nobody working out there now. All those people will return to some capacity. Where are we going to deal with putting them? How do we want to make some logical decisions on where they can go? We also have to be mindful about, you know, the existing residences, especially the ones along Edgerton Road and 95th Street. Of course, Commissioner Manson is ground zero for all that, where he lives. So we've got that sort of R1 area right smack dab in the middle of Edgerton, Sunflower, and then bordered on the northern side by K10. How do we want to handle that? Do we want to potentially flip some of those commercial properties that those residents were pretty adamant they're opposed to rezoning? Flint property, but we've got them shown as a commercial development area. And then, as you can see on the south, of 103rd and Edgerton Road is like about the mixed use area. So that's kind of the challenge with the housing. How are we going to deal with housing, commercial that will come as well? There'll be certainly not everything that we do these days is delivered on a truck to our front doors. So there will be commercial aspects. There'll be doctor's offices, dentists, and other service providers. How do we want to mix all those things in and grow our residential base, R1, R2? We actually have many categories of R1. We've got actually RO, rural suburban, R1, which is actually for large lots, R1A, R2, R2A, and R3. So we've got a lot of different categories we can talk about and consider throughout this process. I guess initially, sanitary sewers are what sort of guides everything. Getting back to the South Growth Area document. Right now, the sewers are going to go like along Edgerton Road and then south along basically Rowan and cut through there and towards on the Sunflower Corridor. And I don't know, maybe you can give them an update, Mike, on what's going to happen with that sewer line. There is an existing line there, but it's really kind of undersized. It will work initially for some growth, but we'll talk about putting in a 24-inch sanitary sewer line parallel to that one down to.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the good utility layout here. This doesn't show the whole picture. I'm just gonna build then on what Brad was saying. You know, the motivation, the backdrop behind this is that, you know, there's reason to be very optimistic about major economic development happening at Gabriel and at Sunflower that will be major job generators. You know, in the orders of thousands of jobs and billions of dollars of investment in the very near term. And so that will trigger infrastructure improvements that give us focus on some, you know, that what would then be possible. You know, because right now we're sitting here with a lot of lines on a map and a lot of great plans, but no money in our pocket to do any of this with. And that's been the story for 20 years. And these plans haven't really changed in 20 years. We know where the sewer needs to go. We know what roads need to be improved. But there's a very real possibility that all of this will become a reality in the near future. And so what that will do is bring development pressures toward us, whether we prepare for them or not. They're going to occur. And we know there's on the housing side, there's a crisis now, I think a nationwide housing crisis. And it's about to become a regional burning crisis with the addition of thousands of jobs to this labor market, specifically to this area here in DeSoto. So kind of the reason we're talking about this now again is twofold. One, that when we did this, the last time we did this future land use map, you can see the Southwest area, very broad brushstrokes here with just the change. I mean, compare it to this area downtown and even to some of these areas over on the east by Gilbert. Smaller blobs over here than there is out here. And now that we have some focus, we have some certainty about what the development patterns are going to be. We know Flint's there. We know we've annexed in TIF Sunflower. We know generally what's going to go on there in the next 10 years. We also know the types of utility infrastructure that those development will bring. And so we're going to be extending sewer to the Flint development. They're designing that now. They'll be building it soon. We're going to extend sewer to the Sunflower site. Same thing. You know, Edgerton Road is getting reconstructed from K10 down to 103rd Street. And depending on what happens at Sunflower, we could have a brand new Lexington Avenue and 103rd Street, all the way out to Evening Star Road. So that's a world of infrastructure that's going on that brings up worlds of possibilities about what ground now is attractive and readily available when you talk about future growth. And at the council level, there's a desire to try to do our part to accommodate the housing crunch that we know is coming. We know we're not going to solve the whole thing. that's going to be a regional effort. We need to, gear up to kind of champion the urgency on housing regionally. But to the housing point, there's a few things a municipality can do that helps specifically with housing costs. And we heard the Chamber of Commerce had a luncheon a couple weeks ago, and the president of the Kansas City Area Home Builders Association spoke about this housing crisis, the housing crunch, and he talked about the 5 L's of housing costs. Housing costs are based on labor, lumber, which means like the material costs, lending, how much your bank's going to charge you for the loan. None of those things we have any control over, but the last 2 we do. And one of those is land, and land costs includes utilities. So what's the price of the dirt, and are utilities available? Am I going to need to spend $1 million to bring sewers there? Okay, we have some idea about what the L cost will be, and a municipality and planning commission more specifically can help determine what that is with infrastructure investment, the likes of which we're about to see funded by big development, right? So that's an opportunity there that we can piggyback on to help serve this housing. The last L are laws, and laws relate to your zoning regulations. Brad talked about these categories of zoning, or categories of residential zoning, density. Generally the denser, the better in terms of housing costs. And so that's another thing eventually we may look at, but that kind of starts with the land use discussion. These broad brush strokes here didn't really think too much about needing to provide housing for 5 or 10,000 jobs in the next 10 years. We're not going to do all that, but we weren't really in that mindset that I think we will soon be, and it'll soon become urgent. So that's kind of the context of what, why we're looking at. We just did this last summer, you'll remember. So that's why we're looking at it again. And I think it's going to involve discussions with, that last L, the laws part. It's going to involve discussions with builders and developer types and the chamber, the EDC, about, what can DeSoto do to kind of spur the type of density and the type of development that's affordable, that can be built, that people can live in, that's maybe you could determine workforce housing, but maybe not. There's housing need at all levels of the market. There's housing, we're short on $5 million houses. We're short on $2 million. We're short on we're short on $200,000 houses, and everything in between. So that's the challenge, and that's kind of why we're doing this. And I think it starts with an analysis of availability, which means, okay, let's see where the sewer is going, where these roads are going, where these water mains will be once these industrial things happen. What's the reset on the utilities, and then what land would then becomes much more attractive and much more feasible to develop because sewers are nearby. And is that land rocky or hilly or in some trust that'll never be broken, or is is the landowner willing and ready to develop or not? And then we kind of focus and sharpen the pencil on these land uses. But I think if you look at the flat, available, easy to develop land, it's around DeSoto, there isn't much of it. Most of it's kind of in this southwest area. It's between K10 and 103rd Street, sort of adjacent to Sunflower. It's also out on Sunflower, but not much of it's north of K10. That's all pretty hilly and rocky and kind of hard to sewer. So just time to start taking a closer look. And then once we have kind of the availability sort of established, then we can talk, about, all right, what are the laws? What's the law situation? What are our zoning regulations and policies about, who pays for what? We can get into incentive policies as well, kind of council level. That probably the last step in the process. So I guess we need to stop talking and hear from some of you about some of those thoughts. And so yeah, I think we start then with the utility and land use sort of analysis and go from there.
So what's the horizon on having something built? Does it need to be done in 2 years or 3 years, or what's the
You mean in terms of
Like-
the housing?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
something,
mean, sooner the better.
Okay,
You know?
so I mean, then with that in mind, then, I mean, we obviously got to focus on, you know, you're bringing sewers up Edgerton, Flint, and then the way it sounds, you know, Sunflower, you know, that's going to be coming online. So there's going to be a lift station over there by, you know, south side of K10, you know, just east of Lexington. So, I mean, really, those are the spots. I mean, everything else, like you mentioned in town, I mean, there's no utilities there. So it's, I mean, that's, I hate to say a pipe dream, you know, between 0 to 3 years.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be tough. to make that happen.
Yeah, so then, you know, I've had several people come in my office about, you know, land that is south of 10, you know, and east of Lexington. And I tell you what, I mean, there's a lot of terrain challenges, which you mentioned already, on that available ground that you do have shown commercial. So, I mean, I mean, there's a creek going through there, there's floodplains right there. I mean, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me comes to mind, you know, the first available site for housing, and that one's tough. You know, like I said, it's got floodplain, it's got a lot of relief across that side, and there's rock down there. So, I mean, I hate to tell you, I mean, that one,
Yeah, well, this area, you know, after this pump station goes here, will be sewer.
right.
But yeah, there's other challenges there.
But I mean, again, also, I mean, you know, with the economics, I mean, it still could go commercial. I mean, somebody still, it could be more,
Yeah,
I mean, let's
higher
just be
better
honest.
use. Yeah,
I mean,
you look at also the 95th Street corridor, you know, some of these uses in there, which is dotted with residential stuff already.
What's the capacity of the current treatment plant?
Yeah, so the current plant is about 1.3 million gallons a day. We run about 400,000 or 500,000 gallons a day through it now. We will be, I'm sorry?
Oh, I just cleared my throat.
Oh, yeah, we are planning to start implementation of an expansion of that, doubling of that capacity.
It was designed for that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was designed to add on, it was designed to kind of triple, actually. So we'll, you know, depending on what comes down the road here, or what the industrial users and if they're manufacturing or warehouse or whatever, we will at least double that capacity. We might even triple it. It's the same kind of story on the water. Right now, as it sits right now, the water plant's got a capacity of about 2 million gallons a day. We use about 1. So we'll be expanding that to at least 4.
With the industry coming and talking about residential, one thing I haven't heard anything about was expanding the fire protection. That's going to be something right now, any kind of building like what Flint's going to be building, we don't have anything to fight it here.
Yeah. So we've been engaged with the fire district on that. And police.
I mean, really, the best spot that I would see would be north of 10, you know, around the Edgerton Road. You know, once that lift station comes in, I mean, that's,
Yeah, so even though everything kind of of course, this creek runs down
Mhm.
Edgerton Road and everything's falling toward the north generally, but with the pump station here roughly, it'll be deep enough to serve a good part of the higher ground up in this area. Some of the stuff down by the road itself, closer to the creek, won't be servable, but
I mean, that seems like the place you would have lower density growth potential to build those kinds of houses. But I don't think that necessarily is where I would suggest you would put, what you're talking about would be housing for folks that are working in the plants
Mhm.
in the areas down there. Seems to be the most logical place you put that would be east of Sunflower Road, right off 103rd. And that whole area right there. That was housing before, wasn't
yeah,
Yes, it was.
it? So if you were
makes a lot
talking
of
about
sense.
putting high density development for low cost housing, it would make a lot of sense to redevelop Clearview City and
Yeah.
develop that.
And we've got a 300-acre commercial blob here on our future land
Right.
use map. Yeah. That and portions of these parcels in here as well. These are some larger parcels that could be shown as mixed use now. We could think about dividing that up. You know, maybe there's a commercial node or strip along
Right.
103rd, but behind it is something of a higher density residential.
I mean, it would make more sense to me to put high density residential there than north of 10.
Mhm.
That's all still in the county also, right?
Yeah, these 4 properties, yeah, this is all still the county, right?
I didn't follow the annexation drawings on the stuff you guys submitted.
Oh, well, Roger, those were done, so on, are you talking about these maps here, like this map? I don't know which map you're
Okay,
talking about.
annexation options 1 and 2.
Yeah, that,
Yeah, I called
that-
Brad on that.
that was done back in 2017.
Yeah,
While we were contemplating, so the annexation.
that's all been annexed.
Yeah, it's all
I was confused.
down to 127th Street.
I thought I missed something somewhere.
Did too.
And, this document was produced for a different reason.
Well, I do think that keeping your commercial at your interchanges makes good sense, if for no other reason than to tell people, hey, if you're thinking about putting up a big house at this interchange, it may not be a great idea.
Mhm.
And so I would say that's true for the 95th Street, 95th to K10 off of Lexington. Makes good sense to keep that as commercial, because that'd be my guess is somebody very well may want to put a house there, and if we had to tell people, that's probably more likely to be commercial, which is really all this is for, because it doesn't have the force of law. It's just a future land use.
What's the purple again now?
Mixed use.
Oh, mixed use.
Yeah, and if you look at that definition, it's kind of everything, really, all the uses, but the intent really is that would be more of a planned type of a mixed use, where you have a combination of residential with close commercial and proximity walkable sort of stuff, which
Other than Lumber One, is there any other businesses along Sunflower Road?
no, there's about to be a Evergy substation right here, just south of K10 on the west side of Sunflower. But there's no other, and of course we have a water treatment plant or a water tower plant site there at the southeast corner of Sunflower.
Yeah.
That's it for now.
So you're talking like R2 type density?
Yeah. R1A, smaller, and maybe it's a different zoning district than we even have right now. Maybe it's some really small lots, single family detached, or
So you're talking
maybe it's
55,
something that
60 foot
allows-
wide?
Yeah, that kind of goes into the zoning ordinance discussion, but I think we need to kind of open our mind up a little bit and not just stick with the categories we have now, but just be open to other sorts of products that maybe we haven't been viable before now.
Well, Mike, with all that's going on, what effect is that going to have on Clearview City? With all this,
Nothing at all. We're hopeful that, and we know that the owner has been pursuing a redevelopment plan on that would fix up all the structures and get all the infrastructure correct. And there was some legislation passed on housing tax credits for lower income properties this year that make that more attractive. And we're hopeful that a large kind of a redo rehab project take place at Clearview. But we expect Clearview to be the community, the rental community that it is now, provide that lower price point product that we don't have anywhere else.
What's the occupancy of Clearview City? Has it got quite a few empty structures right now?
Yeah, so there's, don't quote me on the number, these are ballpark. There's somewhere around 230 existing units that are occupied. Those are duplex units. And then there's another 50 buildings for another 100 units that have been vacant.
I thought there was a lot of vacancy.
Yeah.
So really back to Roger's point, looking at it now, with the commercial around the interchange, like Roger was talking about, and then with the purple areas kind of on the outside of that being mixed use, which could go residential. It looks pretty efficient now that we've talked about it. As long as those purples could go residential, or higher density residential. I mean,
Mhm.
except for that one just to the east of Clearview City, like Mike said, that might mix use.
Yeah, there might be a need to take a closer look at some of these. Because some of these, this parcel, one of these is a street department shop, and one of them's a contractor's office. And, there may be some, and then there's an 80-acre parcel here that's bisected by mixed use and commercial that is zoned heavy industrial, and will very likely be developed in that manner. I mean, it's not likely that it's going to be down zoned to residential. It's likely to go industrial. So, it's a closer look at the reality on the ground, and, where the ownership is and what the existing zoning is and what's likely to occur. Not that has to be the totally guiding factor, but I mean, that's just part of the giving a little more focus to some of these designations. Out here on the Flint property itself, we know that this corner here is not going to be resident or a commercial. We know that this corner might. They've indicated on their preliminary plat that this might be left for a commercial node. So that's an easy swap.
And isn't that southwest corner of Evening Star and K10, isn't that residential too?
Here,
Yeah, I think.
now it is. Yeah,
Oh,
there's a home there. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't know that we need to decide anything this evening, but I think the intent would be to bring back a closer look at, some of the utilities, some more information about maybe the property, the ownership and the availability of utilities, just the underlying conditions that will exist once these utilities get extended. And then we can take a closer look at some of these individual parcels.
Well, the other option to see for high density residential would be south of 103rd, east of Sunflower, where they previously had those barracks. My guess is that would.
The ones that are tearing down right now.
Yeah, that would be an area that would be a pretty obvious place you'd put high density residential.
One thing I did was I went to Johnson County Ames, and you can go back to 1954. You can see a lot of those buildings which really pop out. They're residential of some sort. So I mentioned barracks, I don't know how they were structured, but they were living quarters. And that whole area that we just talked about, that we've got shown is what a curve on Lexington is and Sunflower and 33rd. That was all residential, and actually, it kind of had a little bit of a finger that stuck out farther to its northeast. That was all residential, duplexes, basically. And there was a lot of activity going on out there.
Sure.
It was kind of an eye-opener. Look at that aerial photo and think, holy smokes, what was this sort of like? 60 years ago. I think, Bob, you're telling me there are 4 grocery stores in town.
Yeah.
People were
Main Street had basically anything you wanted. You had 2 grocery stores uptown, at least.
There's
2
4 grocery
restaurants.
stores,
Was it 4 up there?
three restaurants. I think there was 2 bars on the east end,
You had the hardware store, the
the
furniture
hardware
store,
store,
the variety store.
yeah.
Newspaper
drugstore.
offices up there. And they were basically sticking people to live in anything that had a roof on it. And some of them were rented out by the 8-hour shifts.
So you could basically pitch a tent anywhere you wanted.
Yeah. Well, basically behind where Performance Glass was, that
Right.
big field, Kathy's got a lot of pictures of that.
So the purple section again, clarify for me what exactly, how that's defined.
Um,
What can go in there?
Yeah, well, it's so Yeah, the land use description is mixed use and let me just I'll just pull up the comp plan.
So I guess my concern is if somebody comes in and says, yeah, I want to put industrial on there, how easy is it to slide that into the mixed use?
I don't think that would work. Mixed use is mixed retail and
I just
Commercial.
want to clarify what it says because we obviously don't need any more industrial because we have more than we're going to use for the next 50 years, but with 6,000 acres of it. So I just want to make sure that we're not leaving an opportunity for somebody to come in, buy something and say, well, it's mixed use and we can do industrial here. We lose the prime spot for residential development.
So here's the definition of mixed use in the comp plan. So commercial services, office, hospitality, entertainment and retail, limited medical, financial service, parks and institutional uses, and then the definition of mixed use includes.
There we go.
So not industrial.
So we do need to clarify mixed use to include residential?
I don't know. I think we just need less mixed use. I mean, in my mind, like mixed use was just like, well, we don't know. Let's just put mixed.
But
use.
inherently it's residential as well, right? I mean, mixed use, doesn't that typically indicate residential also?
Well, intended to become high-quality planned environments with a variety of land use types, active in entertainment, dining, office, and retail destinations with planned residential components.
Yeah, so I think residential is good.
So if the infrastructure upgrades would start today, how long time period are you talking for the water and the sewer and electric?
The water and sewer will be extended to the Flint site, and Edgerton Road will be constructed by the end of 2023. And the sunflower stuff is likely on a very similar timeframe.
So you're still looking year and a half.
Yeah, that's no time at all. I mean, we're not going to get all this done and court a developer and have homes ready.
Yeah, I know.
These are the first steps.
I'm just curious what kind of timeline it would take to get that in place.
I guess what I could say now is, it's quick enough to essentially proceed as though this infrastructure is in place with our planning thinking, and proceed as though all this is because 5 years from now, you could have 8,000 people employed out there. 10 years from now, you could have 15,000 people. I mean, that's the world of possibilities we're talking about. So it behooves us to start thinking as though we're behind.
Well, it should be.
We are.
I think we need to get our plan in place because forward-thinking people are seeing the future of development. And they're going to move now, especially if they read the minutes and see that we're talking about changing this stuff. Somebody has a specific use in mind, they're going to be moving faster than we are.
Yeah.
So typically,
So-
John, if somebody walks through my door and all this stuff is in place, it'd be 8 months to a year before they could pull a permit to start even building that. And it'd be another year after that for the done. So it's roughly 2 years, if everything was built today, that somebody could be living in an apartment or a house or something out there in that intersection.
I guess the only other place I could think of, or that readily comes to mind of where you would want to put more high density residential would be fronting K10 itself down 95th Street. If you were going to build apartments or something like that, you might put that out by the highway.
Which isn't uncommon if you drive down K10.
Right.
Plenty of things that are in fact directed to the highway.
But if you wanted to try to direct that sort of high density development, that would be, I think,
Where did you just say?
where you have your cursor.
Right here, along here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The chances of that developing into acre lots is probably a lot less likely than high density development.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's nice about that area is its proximity to the schools.
Well, that's going to be true then.
Access to that location. With the new roads, it's pretty nice to get from there to the schools.
That's a good point.
In half of the city, you can't walk to the school because there's not sidewalks, there's other things. So,
Although I'll tell you, I think in today's world, nobody wants to walk to school.
no, I know.
No.
but
They all
it's-
want to have a bus, and walking to school is a horrible idea. I mean, I think our schools are actually okay located. I mean, they're in busy corridors where you have to take a bus because everybody wants to take the bus.
The other thing that's nice is the park is right there too.
Mhm.
If you want to
One
maximize.
thing I also kind of wanted to bring up that I was thinking about is, it's not just the people that will be working there, there's gonna be a lot of people constructing stuff that we put up buildings that are not gonna be long-term residents. We put up buildings, building water, sewer lines, and the hotels, and all that kind of.
RV sites.
Super 8's gonna get.
I mean, a lot of these work laborers will travel, you know, if they're from out of town, they'll bring their camper and they're looking for an RV site to park for 6 months or so.
Wow.
What is that classified as? In our zoning, what is it?
You know, I don't know. I don't,
We
have
don't
we
have
looked? Have we?
anything that really
Possibilities.
No, I'm just curious where that could end up.
Yep.
Is that classified as commercial?
Well, you know, so far, kind of, I think up until now, you know, if we talk about RV sites, you know, the Riverfest, we have a master plan for Riverfest Park that includes, I don't know, 10 or 12 RVs. We think about of a KOA or recreational type thing, but the type of RV park you need for this is mass housing type of solution. And it's not, it's a whole world different. It's different than the KOA thing.
There's a guy down there in Garnett that had a steel company and pipeline was running through Garnett from, coming up north down through Garnett. He shut his business down, dozed it, put in 100 RV spots.
Really?
He was full for 2 full years.
Yep. I think that's what you're looking. I mean, every site within a 50-mile range is gonna be full year round for 5 years.
Yes, I've seen some pretty dense RV, but I mean, you're basically renting a parking space, you know, I mean, it's a 9 by 20 foot long space. And they're just lined up like you're out, you know, at the stadium. Just packed in. It's not regular like Mike said, Camp America.
Yeah, no,
They've got a little bit of swimming pools and some playgrounds and stuff. This is just hookups and a place to park your vehicle. That's it.
Right across the street from Amazon down in Cherryvale, that's what they did. RV park for their seasonal workers.
So I don't know.
Well, maybe the spot for that's out, you know, closer to the job site, and that's a temporary thing anyway.
But I guess it is something we could sort of suggest on the land in Sunflower. That's something that they've got to sort of consider.
my opinion is somewhere between Edgerton to Lexington to K10, and there is a prime future, most opportunity to place large scale residential, some sort. And then that kind of keeps it not scattered all over the place, somewhat. The nice thing about being in that area, I would say, is you can leave there and you're on the highway in a minute or two, and you're running down 75 to wherever you're going to work. So, and it's easy to get into town. You can go either way. It's just a nice spot for residential access.
Traffic on 10 is gonna get real interesting.
Stand up.
So what kind of timeline are you thinking we need to make decisions on local ones?
Oh, well, you know, I think this probably occurs throughout the fall. You know, I think if we have something, it's going to involve, you know, maybe joint workshop with the council and maybe the chamber EDC groups. That's kind of the 6 month timeframe is what I'm thinking. Yep. Well, that's a good input, you know, unless anybody has anything else, we'll take this back, refine, I'll get you some better maps about where things are and what the possibilities might be, and we can.
Mike, what
Further
other
discuss.
ideas did you have for residential? You said there may be some other categories that we didn't even have established yet. What were you thinking on that?
Well, I wasn't, nothing really specific, but just to kind of keep your mind open to maybe a lot that's a bit smaller than we're used to. You know, we have R1A, which is single family, but the lot still might be pretty large. You know, we might consider smaller lots, smaller setbacks. R2 is where you get into the duplex, you know, sync 1 and 2, we might think about a fourplex, you know, sort of a zoning designation. That's just the sort of thing. I wasn't
Okay.
thinking anything specific.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
it
I
just-
guess one thing else that's come to mind is that 0 lot lines, you can build right up to the lot line itself. And actually, it's all kind of like a duplex, but they're still single family homes, usually long, narrow. So I mean, there's different cases out there that we don't really, and haven't had the need to really look at.
Okay, well, that's good feedback. We'll continue this next month then.
Okay. Fred, you want to bring up item B?
Yeah, this is kind of a little bit of a follow-on as mentioned. There's a lot of rumbling around about electronics, computer, battery plant coming to DeSoto. Just looking at our code, Mike, and I kind of, we're not, well, we wanted to bring you the recommendation or talk about more of an economic development type level. We allow these things in the light industrial district, but by special use permit. And because there's some pressure to move forward and allow these things to happen by right, there still would be a site plan review and all the things that go along with that. We're not going to touch, but it would be something that would, in my mind, they can rezone the property to light industrial, and then they have to go through a special use permit process, which is a very similar process. Both. A lot of the questions that are asked, that golden criteria applies to both processes. And so we looked at, and these are the kind of jobs we're really trying to, they're higher end paying jobs. We don't want just downplay some of the positions that might be out there. But we would like to have the more technical higher end positions that fall into these categories, 334, 335, and also specifically manufacturing. I think part of the reason why the battery manufacturing broke out, it is a separate SIC code. But if you think back in the day, the lead acid batteries and all the problems that ACL code, I just had no method, cleanups that has happened. That's not the type of process we're talking about. It's lithium ion type manufacturing processes that aren't, those that don't have, I'm not saying there aren't any issues with them, but they're not certainly the old school auto batteries that really at the time they didn't have any kind of controls on what was happening with byproducts of the batteries themselves. We've come a long ways, not just the environmental movement, but just efficiency and how to make things better and not pollute the environment, because ultimately these companies learned that they had to pay a price to clean up their messes. They don't want to create the mess in the first place. So I feel like the battery is a safer use in the light industrial district. We talked about is removing those special use permit stipulations in the M2 category. That's that S that's off to the right. Right by Mike's cursor, and then also the 3 S's in the light industrial category, 334, 335, and 33591, which is specifically towards battery manufacturing or recycling. So that's kind of where we're at as far as moving forward. I know the SRL is working very hard to get these types of uses and working on, as I understand, a legal description for about a rezoning of 600 acres that's targeted at these industries. Want to sort of move that forward, bring that topic up, what your thoughts were on the special use permit, removing that and just changing the S to a P. we kind of, this is going to be a similar discussion we had with the contractor uses when we changed, allowed electrical contracting to be in the commercial category. We had a discussion, I did include in your staff report, actually NAICS, there's two different codes, the SAC codes and NAICS codes. So you can see all the things that would be allowed in those uses. And when we, typically how we look at this is, if they're not listed specifically, the first three digits tell you what's all in that category. So if you allow 3 through 4 by right, you're actually allowing all of these uses. So we could remove some of those uses if you didn't like them. I know Patrick's also cautioned me a few times that you can't just cherry pick things and be exclusionary. But on the other hand, we also have to be mindful of some of the things that we like or don't like. So that's why in the staff report, we're just going to change the 334 to 335 from an SUP, which will allow all these uses by right. Doesn't change the fact that they would still have to go through the rezoning process, and still have to go through site plan review, and of course, follow applicable building codes and look at environmental land disturbance processes that we're working with. The plan they believe submitted their notice of intent, and their grading of this, and all those things evaluated as well, along with utility plans and so. So I don't want to sound like we're just making it simply easier, but it's sort of, in my mind, it's a redundant process to go through the zoning and special use permit process, which is a pretty similar type of process.
So if you wanted to do these things, why wouldn't you just go ahead and get an M2 zone?
Or they couldn't be zoned, but that's, once again, what we had talked about, what they wanted to do was stay in light industrial category, try to stay away from using the M2 zoning.
So how do I distinguish between a permitted use for computer electronic manufacturing but not wood product manufacturing?
Well, that's just, you're right, there's a difference.
I mean, if you're going to give it that, why wouldn't you make them all permitted? If you're gonna-
Well, that's certainly an idea as well that I've thought about.
So then what's the distinction between the M1 and the M2?
Well, there isn't one particularly.
Right. Because the M1 is, allows you to do these certain things, but you have to have a special use permit for it. Maybe it should just be an M2. So
Well, I
you wouldn't do that?
Well, I think, the reason you might not want to ask for an M2 is all these other uses that are not permitted in M1, but are permitted in M2. That zoning question becomes a little bit harder when you have to consider all these other uses that aren't allowed. I think with these, the exception being that the standard of the industry, when you look at these types of processes, has progressed, like Brad was mentioning, to the point where they are far less intrusive and obstructive to what might be around them than they used to be, maybe than they were when we adopted this thing originally in 1998. So we just think it's appropriate to move those into the light industrial, permitted in the light industrial category, rather than the heavy.
So it's strictly environmental is why that they request a special use permit for M1. That's all it is.
Not environmental. It's kind of, all zoning is about, your impact to to the surrounding community.
Yeah.
So these types of manufacturings have moved from open boundary type things where there might be a lot of noise and impact and odors to a very highly technical, concealed operation with a silent building, although a large building sitting on the site. So.
Is there, I don't know if you know this or not, but is there any of these facilities local? Like these battery manufacturers or anything in the metro area?
To my knowledge, no, there aren't any of those battery manufacturers, at least the types of lithium ion batteries you're talking about. Moving to Kansas, I don't think Missouri's in discussion at all. It's just down to DeSoto and site in Oklahoma. So
What troubles me is that it, we just went through this with the Gabriel property. And we've talked about what's going to happen out there in terms of an M1 and what you can do. And now we're basically saying we can make it battery manufacturing is okay. And there was some level of protection by saying that was an M1 as opposed to a manufacturing facility. And I mean, I guess as I look at this list, I don't see anything that's permitted in an M2 that isn't subject to a special use permit in M1, right? Is there a P here that doesn't have an S next to the M1? So the same
Well,
discussion
that's
applies to
not
all
the
of
whole,
us.
that's not all of Appendix A. Maybe we
Okay.
should look at,
Or maybe
Yeah, this is
everything.
just.
that's just one page. I don't know, you might be right about the rest of it. I haven't. Let's look at it.
Yeah, this is just the manufacturing category.
I mean, so theoretically, if it's manufacturing, it's appropriate in M2, but only with a special use permit, with the exception of these three we're talking about. That seems kind of wrong to me.
Patrick, I'd like to have, what do you have to say about, what's your opinion on this?
Making it by right.
Right,
I mean, it does seem like we're carving out a special exception for that business, but I mean, that's something definitely you guys can do, but I do get Roger's point.
I guess I don't understand what the barrier would be to having somebody have an M2 one, especially if this is ground, we're gonna have to rezone anyhow.
I just wonder if it's, heavy industrial is kind of scary to people, like, whoa, it would be a severe change.
And it's not,
zoning.
Not for the ground.
it's
we're
not
talking
consistent with the future land use plan. Yeah, I'm looking at this. I don't see any permitted uses in the M2 that do not have a special, that aren't either also permitted in the
Right.
M1 or.
So the manufacturing category, we will allow you to do manufacturing in M1, but that always has to be a special use. Correct. From this.
Unless we do this.
If we're carving out these three, why wouldn't we do it for the rest of them if that's the way you feel?
So is there anybody in DeSoto that has M1 zoning with a special use permit right now that would not like that?
No. Don't believe so.
I mean, it would be viewed as a pretty big burden for the applicant to not only rezone, but then turn around and get special use permits. I think part of it's trying to make DeSoto more attractive than Oklahoma site. And I know you guys, that's not your entire function, but
But why wouldn't we encourage the person who's making that application, encourage them to do the M2 as opposed to doing an M1 and getting a special use permit?
But if they get that in too, isn't it, I mean, you could, I don't know, there's some pretty intense, crazy stuff that once it's zone M2, you could do, like rock quarry or,
Guided missile manufacturing.
I saw that on
landfill.
Yeah. We kind of had that before.
Isn't that where you want them to put this stuff, as a place that you could do something like that?
Well, no, I mean,
Where do we
we've
want?
got this future land use map is light industrial. There's heavy industrial down here.
Okay.
But there's light industrial there. Just future land, I mean, one of the considerations for rezoning.
So take me through the process here. If we still stick to our guns and keep special use permit for these uses on M1, They would have to get all 600 rezoned to M1, and then each building would have to come in for a special use permit. Would that be accurate?
Not each building, just each as the tracks.
Each tract, yeah.
Each use, I mean, they
Okay.
could,
But when they
yeah.
came in for the change from existing to whatever they're applying, couldn't they carve out a section and say we want this section to be M2? And the initial rezoning?
Sure, yeah, they could.
So if they have an idea that before they do this, this thing's coming into this spot.
Right.
All of it's M1, we're gonna carve out this section of whatever, and say that's gonna, we're proposing that be M2, and pick it all up in one process, right?
Yeah, true, they could do that. Yeah, I just think the potential trouble is that our future land use map, as you look at it here, says light industrial in these areas where this thing can immediately occur.
Yeah, and then also Mike's point, there's the broader allowance of heavier uses in M2, which is what it is about. That will be allowed by right.
If
up
we
and down
think,
the chart.
if we think that the manufacturing uses you've identified here are all appropriate, then make it all permitted. If not, then they probably ought to be in M2. But I don't see the distinction between that and printing and related support activities. Somebody wants to run a printing press, they have to get a special use permit. Food manufacturing, we've got people who've done that, right? He's got a special use permit in M1, or he's a commercial.
Custom foods. Yeah, they don't have a special use permit. They probably pre-existed this table, that's my guess.
I mean, if we don't need that, if you feel like the nature of manufacturing has evolved, that you don't have to do special use permits, so be it. But you're making a distinction between somebody who's going to make refrigerators, which would I assume fall into the electrical appliances, component manufacturing, and printing services seems kind of silly.
Yeah. We're trying to address an immediate need without.
I get it.
Can you make it based on designated area? So let's say we say you pick anything in the future development, because the problem becomes something that's existing in one. Somebody comes in and wants to put something that is, whatever, making batteries or whatever else. That's an issue, but I don't think, there's probably no concern because we know all the industrials going future sunflowers. In one of this designated area, it's permittable to do these other items as well. But if you're not within this designated zone or area, then you have to get a special use permit.
That'd be probably creating a different zoning category.
I'm just trying to think of other options.
Yeah, I mean, that's another column on this page.
Mike, we've used that overlay district. Is that a possibility of something like this?
Well, typically I guess typically overlays add regulations rather than take them away. So,
It would seem to me to make more sense to do as you're suggesting is let's make a new zoning category for that area,
Have the other ones grandfathered in, so to speak?
right?
I don't know. I don't think there's any concern because we know that all of that is going to take place and that whole area is pretty much going to be that. I'm just trying to think of another option.
I guess though, if we made a new category, it'd be very similar to probably the existing M1, except we would change the yellow ones, maybe a few others.
I mean, in that place you're going to put it, well, I'm sure.
Is that really, accomplishing
Well, what
something distinct?
it does do is it says that those places we've approved M1, which we have historically said you can't do manufacturing there without a special use permit, those stay the same. Those stay requiring a special use permit.
So we can come up with an M1A category that allow certain manufacturing by right.
I mean, if it's that much of a difference for them seeking an M2 or they need an M2, I guess I don't know the differences there. It just seems to me if you wanted to manufacture it right, you probably want to get an M2. Am I misunderstanding that?
No, I get your points. Yeah.
I mean, certainly Sunflower is a unique opportunity with our town to redevelop what previously had been a heavy manufacturing site. So giving it its own zoning category seems the appropriate thing to me.
I think, yeah, that's, it's great territory to explore.
Sure.
For sure. Something that we should take our time with. With the new zoning category, look at all these things. We might, there's been talk before of just getting away from this Exhibit A thing, having all these, and most cities don't do this like we do in this manner. The intent right now is to address an immediate pending need, urgent need, with this proposal, this particular development that may be descending upon us. So I think maybe we could do a dual track, something that addresses the immediate need, but also overall looks more broadly at a longer term solution. Might be the direction we need to head.
So Mike, are you thinking it'd be a city initiated rezoning for like all of Sunflower?
Yeah, well, no, I was just thinking about creating the category and working that into our future land use discussions. That there's this other category now that's a possibility, not necessarily rezoning anything to anything in particular. Because right now, all of it's all in the city and it's all zoned county rural. It's
Right.
Technically, it's zoning right now.
We're gonna have to do rezoning for anybody, so let's find a category that works.
Yeah.
So one of the requirements you would have to get that zoning designation, one of the criteria would the land has to be located within that.
That could be, I don't know. I haven't thought about a new zoning category until just now. Yeah, I don't know if we can, it almost like have to be an overlay sort of a scenario, sort of a Sunflower overlay. And, we've talked in more broad terms with the county now about county has a need to redo their area plan because only 3,000 acres of it is in the county now. And they wanted to engage us, this group, on an area plan for at least for their part of Sunflower, because, they treated it more like a development plan where they're showing very specific uses, and so we may proceed that manner too, which would tie into this sort of discussion as well. But would all be a much broader discussion, and probably should be done more deliberately.
I wonder what everybody's comfort level would be to accommodate this opportunity to do a text amendment to change what's here, but with the understanding of doing this new zoning category that would essentially you'd be making sure these uses only went to the Sunflower Park.
Hey, Roger, I think maybe one of the other issues is M2 is by special permit use as well on this designation.
Right, which I certainly understand there may be a reason not.
Right. But it's also in hearing what everybody's saying, the main thing coming in is battery manufacturer. So it's special use for both categories.
Right.
So even if they said they were M2, they still got to get.
Right, but I'd feel much more comfortable about switching that to a permit
Right.
if we're talking about the
Yeah, no, I
nature
agree.
of battery manufacturing.
I guess maybe to Mike's point, maybe we could, once again, your comfort levels, just look at the battery manufacturer only, change that again, one to a P. in the M2, and if we can drop the 334 to 335, and then work on this broader new district for sunflower.
To me, that seems indefensible. I mean, there's really, to make that distinction compared to the other ones, that seems pretty arbitrary. I would say if you're going to do that, make them all permitted.
Well, I see your point, Roger, but then all of a sudden, then there is no difference between M1 and M2.
I would agree
And then
for
you
manufacturing.
got Sort of Katie bar the door. 'Cause
I don't disagree with that.
I don't know that that's what we want to stand on is.
I would think that the additional zoning district would probably be a better way to handle it. I mean, how is that anything other than a special rule? How do we support that?
Well, I think it is, I mean, I get your point, but like based on, I mean, Mike has a lot more information than even I do, but I mean, we know what the product is that they're going there for. So it is a known use. And as Mike says, it's fully enclosed and
I think our
like
biggest
we
problem,
know what we're,
our biggest problem is that's opening up all the other areas that are currently M1 for that designation to take any of this. So all of those places, that's the biggest issue is, okay, that's fine. We don't have, I don't think anybody in here has an issue doing that for this one opportunity. The concern is now you're opening up that opportunity unless it's addressed some other time for all of these other empty spots that are M1.
and that's why I think we'd have to do them in tangent. Like, obviously, this opportunity that we have a chance at, they're not gonna double that up in DeSoto, basically, in another site. So I think we would need to close that, do this, designate that you could only do that use within sunflower pretty quickly to make sure what you're articulating does not happen.
I think it'd be easy enough to create an M1A district that is essentially exactly the same as the M1 with one letter difference as the initial, so to account for that potential. So that, I mean, that would at least protect that concern that you're talking
I mean, why wouldn't you allow any manufacturing in the M1? I mean, for these others that are permitted too, I mean, that one letter difference, I'd say that probably should go for all.
Like food manufacturing, if you have a hog slaughtering facility, I mean, to me, that's a lot
What would
more intensive than a battery.
Well, and yeah, and all those differences should be vetted thoroughly.
which is why there's a supplemental use permit, a special use permit, right?
Oh.
And that's why you do that.
Well, some of those, yeah, but I'm talking about whether it should be a blank, which is not permitted, or a special or permitted. All those discussions on all these things on this page and all the other pages, if it's A, we can have those discussions about all of those, throughout the list. That's a
Because what
long,
I'm saying is in M1A, that's an appropriate place to do manufacturing.
right. I mean, what we could, if you want to get silly with it, you could do M1A and not allow anything except this one thing. That's the zoning district that we're talking about. That's to the extreme, I guess.
Or, if the overlay is an option too, that's it's zoned M1, but in this overlay, it's permitted use.
I'm curious, Mike, you created an R2A. Which one did you use? That's Dave Anderson's property. Andersonville, and it's the only one in town. I mean, how much effort is it to create that one column? And
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, but the thing that takes the time is this discussion about all of these uses and categories that go along with that. I mean, that took, and that one we were looking at densities and setbacks and all sorts of economic factors as well. So if, you know, to the extent we could keep it focused on just the immediate intent, the immediate need, then we could plug it in there without any problem, you know, have a public hearing and proceed with it. And then leave the larger discussion for, you know, in coordination with future land use plan and housing discussion and everything else.
So I guess what's the goal? Is the goal to take a public discussion on this in June and then vote on it and go to city
goal would,
council?
yeah, to have a public hearing on it. Yeah, relatively short order, in June, and then forwarded to the council in July. That's the need.
So no matter what happens, it still goes to public hearing, right? The process is the same either way.
Yeah, that's right.
But I guess sort of,
I was just saying, we're not delaying the process.
well, I guess we would be if we create a new district, we are delaying it.
Well, no, I mean, we could
Oh, we still do
advertise a
that.
public hearing with the new district,
Oh,
with
okay.
this new column in it, so it's the same
That's what I
time
want to
frame.
make sure we weren't.
I guess,
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah.
yeah, my sensitivity about the new district is that, you know, a lot of times those discussions last a lot longer than just, you know, one meeting. So that's why this was kind of proposed as a quick, relatively clean, I think, you know, reasonable minds could disagree, but, you know, we can make the argument that these particular uses are materially different than they were 20 years ago when we first adopted this. And so now there's legitimate reason to consider a change to these permitted uses. But all else, you know, that we've discussed, you know, adding another column here wouldn't be material different than that. It's, you know, as long as we can keep it kind of focused toward that.
So then I add this then, but I mean, is that another rezoning? Then if we say we want to move forward with the public hearing on just making all that stuff permitted in M1 to facilitate a need, and then we move forward with creating an M1-A, do they need to get rezoned in, or is that something that we can just convert them over?
It hasn't been zoned yet. They got to pick a zone.
Yeah, they haven't,
Oh, okay,
they
so
haven't rezoned.
When are they coming out with rezoning? Or-
Just shortly thereafter. Yeah, I mean, probably this summer in July and August.
I just think it's enough of a challenge to do the kind of development that we're talking about on the Gabriel property without it being manufacturing, but giving it a right of manufacturing it.
Mhm.
So I like the new district option better.
Yeah.
That's just me.
I guess I would be for it if it wouldn't delay anything.
I can just see those people coming.
What's that?
I would be for that if it wouldn't delay.
Yeah, I think we can keep the scope narrow enough
Okay.
to meet,
I'd
to
hate to-
not delay, and I think address some of the concerns I'm hearing, but then also leave a possibility, you know, like Patrick said, that you know, that there's a broader discussion that needs to happen. And we can definitely have that as we move forward with the future land use stuff.
So do you think we've come to a solution?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have direction enough. If you're okay, you know, with staff calling the public hearing for this purpose at the next meeting.
And the intent is basically to just change those three proposed items.
Well, the intent would be to introduce a new zoning, an M1A,
Right.
that essentially would kind of just address those three items.
Allow those three items.
And it could be that would be expanded.
Oh, no, I think we
Future,
should
sure.
review that, sure.
But
because I think
the list
that-
would at least take care of the immediate need.
Yeah, and then we can, revise that in future as we get deeper into it.
So Roger, you're okay with it?
I'm good.
Put that in a motion?
I mean, can I just ask one
Go
other
ahead.
question? Do you run the risk of, just being perceived as, wow, you're creating an entire new city zoning district for this particular applicant, whereas seems like just allowing those uses as permitted in the district seems like less of an accommodation, than creating an entire new zoning district.
I think, so in my opinion, it's the opposite effect. If we just change it and say it's okay, just because these guys want to do something, I think that was worse than trying to set up something that's a little more specific. That's just my opinion. My perception would be that if we just change it, then it's like, well, we just changed it. They asked us to.
Well, I think if we did the separate zoning district and limited it to geographical area, like, to me, that makes sense. But to me, if we're not going to do it by geography, we're just saying these three uses in M1A you can do by right. It just, I guess maybe it would be perceived the same either way. But to me, the limiting it to that land area makes the most sense. But,
Well, but if we create the new zoning category, nobody has any right to do, because that category doesn't exist in the city until someone rezones to it. So this body, the council, would have ultimate control, where we know we just rezoned 370 acres out there to M.
And the purpose of doing a new zoning district is because certain manufacturing uses are less intrusive than those that have been historically considered ones we had to have a special use permit for. So we know as to these three categories, we're comfortable with that. And if there are others in the future, so be it. I think that's a little more, I think it's a lot more defensible than just flipping those to Ps and saying, we did this.
I understand what Patrick is saying though, because there was a lot of repercussions when Flint was coming through and how they felt like we were just accommodating them. That kind of looks like what we're doing with this, just picking these three. I understand what Patrick's saying. So why couldn't we just rezone the whole New Sunflower? Make a special category for that?
I think that's ultimately the intent, right?
That's kind of where we want to keep everything contained to anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, creating the new category allows us to make that decision. I wouldn't just rezone everything to this new category we're talking about it, you know. Probably it's a little premature to say that, but I think that's the function of what the new category would do.
We do have zoning restrictions that say that certain zones are only available in certain geographic historic district.
let's see, I don't think so. I think this is.
Not really.
I thought don't we have a historic district, RH maybe?
Yes, that's a zoning category.
That's limited to a certain geographical area.
Downtown. So whatever.
I mean, it is a certain geographical area, but there's nothing to say that a future planning commission or council couldn't add to that area.
Of course not, but the actual definition of the zoning for the RH is that it has to be in this area in order to get an RH, right?
No,
It doesn't say that?
no, don't believe so, Roger. I don't think there's any of that geographical.
Yeah, I could be remembering it wrong.
I know we did that neighborhood improvement process and we had maps where it was only in that area.
Yeah. But that's an overlay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking
I
of.
don't think any of our zoning classifications say you have to be out by the highway. Here, I don't think so.
Well, we do have a legal description for a sunflower property. Could we do some sort of overlay district and just apply it to that?
Well, I guess what I was talking about is that in order for you to be zoned to MA, this MA or this M1A, the applicant would have to have, their property would have to be located within Sunflower. We're not rezoning all this. It's just saying that one of the criteria is you have to have your land within this geographical boundary. So anybody else outside of that can't even apply to rezone.
I guess we could do that. I don't know the reason for having to do that.
Gosh, I really thought that's the way the historic district was.
Let me look.
Yeah, I thought it was like, it's the alley north.
Yeah, I thought it was limited to a certain.
Part, it's the alley to the south.
Well, we do have that uptown overlay district, which does apply to the RH area. But there's no reason the RH couldn't be expanded. There are areas that are right up next to the RH that you could say could have easily been put into RH.
The Old Town District, we call it that, but we don't necessarily define it. Huh?
And yeah, the RH district, in Old Town DeSoto, if you look at the original plat, the RH district is bigger than just that original plat area.
Yeah, there's
So we didn't define it.
Uh-uh.
Okay.
I don't know, maybe the C1 district has that downtown.
I don't
It's gotta
remember.
be that.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, is that,
You know, I guess one way I wonder if you can think about it is, like with this, the three uses, like I said, we know what, like, for example, if we had some other, we created a research, we wanted to incentivize, research triangle in DeSoto, and we, studied and that product, we sort of got our heads around that, we know what all is entailed in that. And would you be comfortable going through the list on similarly, in our regs, they're by special use permit, but you're comfortable enough with what the city wants to incentivize to say that, we're comfortable enough. We don't feel like having this extra process of a special use permit. We want to take that particular use and just let it be permitted instead of a special use. It seems like in that list, I think that's what Mike is getting at. There probably are even more that we even right now you could look through and say, well, gosh, manufacturing of, fishing lures is, there's nothing obnoxious about that. Why do we even have to have a special use permit for that? So I feel like you could,
there'd be a logical expansion of the M1A. If you did something like that, you could certainly take your time and expand that to whatever other manufacturing you felt was okay in that same kind of facility, same kind of area. That's interesting. So we actually call it downtown or central district or historic district, but we don't actually define what those were.
It's on the map. It's on the zoning map.
But it doesn't prevent somebody from seeking a rezoning elsewhere using that zone.
Yeah. Right.
So maybe the M1A should be designated Sunflower District. Maybe you don't define it. Maybe you just call it that.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything precluding
Call it Sunflower District.
Yep, there you go.
a geographic boundary to where that can
M1A
exist.
Sunflower District to me makes sense.
Give us the ability to tweak that district too, to the extent there's additional changes we need to make to help facilitate the thing.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yep. I think, well, that's the direction we'll head then. A public hearing, the next meeting for a new zoning district, largely to address those particular areas of use that would mimic the M1 otherwise. And we may geographically bound it to just on the Sunflower site.
I like that idea.
Okay,
So that's what's going to be on the next
that'll be a public hearing in June.
M1A Sunflower District, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know what, we call it whatever, but
you'll tweak it, right?
yeah, Patrick will come up with the name.
But Brownfield District.
Like sunflower.
So as of right now, that'll take care of that item.
Yes.
Yeah, this is just a discussion. so
Okay.
There's no necessary interaction.
Mike, you want to tell us about the planning meeting on June 6th?
Sure, yeah, in the spirit of cooperation with potential industrial user at Sunflower, the applicant has requested a special planning commission meeting to consider a TIF project plan for several hundred acres on the Sunflower site. You, I think, are aware that after the annexation of the 6,000 acres, the council immediately followed that with the formation of a tax increment financing district. The entire 6,000 acres is in the TIF district. And what that is intended to do is essentially put future increased tax revenues in a process that can be used to clean up, to extend infrastructure to the site and clean up blighted areas on the property. So that's been the general intent, and the statutory procedure for development is that you establish the district first, which has been done. Then for each development that comes along, there's a project plan that needs to be approved by the city council. The project plan includes specifics about what the development, where it will be, how big it will be, what it will look like, and then also the actual level of incentive. So the increased property tax percentage that gets collected and can be used toward those infrastructure and remediation efforts, that gets formalized on the TIF project plan level. The Planning Commission has a role in that process. Statutorily, you are required to make a finding that the TIF plan, the use that's intended, is consistent with the comprehensive plan that the city has. And so that's really the extent of the Planning Commission's role in the process. So we'll be asking you to make that finding on June 6th. The City Council will also have a special meeting that same evening, immediately following the Planning Commission meeting, to set the date for the public hearing to consider that TIF project plan. There's a 30-day window for that to happen, and that can't start until you make your finding. So that's the request. Respectfully request a special meeting on June 6th.
And we need everybody here.
We need a quorum. We don't need everybody. We need a quorum. Whether in person or remote is still an option. So if we can have a motion to set that meeting now, then that'll handle the public notice for that meeting.
I'll make a motion that we establish the special planning commission meeting on June 6th at 6 o'clock.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
1 second. Manson,
Yes.
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
And then on the 28th, and we'll have this other piece come up here on the M1A
That's right.
to vote
Yeah.
on it, or for public hearing.
Public hearing.
Okay.
Sure, just, I don't want to overthink it, but Mike, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but I assume everybody would be comfortable. I'm just a little bit concerned because now I'm remembering, Sunflower actually already submitted applications to rezone. We have this pre-development agreement. Does the fact that their land may have to be rezoned to a new zoning district that won't be in existence at the time we're doing some of this, is that going to cause issues?
Yeah,
Particularly with the developer, like, no, we don't want, we don't want all that.
Yeah, we don't, well, the intent is not to rezone until I didn't realize we already have rezoning applications. I don't think there's a legal description for the rezoning area yet. I think that's still being worked out. So I would think that our anticipation of the rezoning effort would come after July, sometime in that August timeframe. So maybe it's something we can do all this, which is kind of the urgency toward it, and then have the rezoning submitted.
I just wanted to mention that in case we run into a brick wall where,
Yeah.
everybody's consensus was that, hey, let's do this new district. If that just is gonna blow everything up.
If that, yeah, that's well, true. I mean, we need to, we'll chase that down. We'll make
Yeah.
sure about that. And if that's the case, we'll communicate that with you before you see it on an agenda somewhere.
Anything else tonight?
No, I'm good, Chairman. We're gonna have the pole sign on the June 28th. We're gonna site plan for a fence, and then we're gonna have a potential discussion of a new zoning category. Woo-hoo! That's what we got coming up.
Well, nothing else, motion to adjourn?
Bob, sorry, I just wanted to follow up with you guys. Remember at the last meeting, we talked about that provision in the Code of Ethics.
Right.
Where I talked to the mayor and actually a couple of council members, and they were completely against revising it. They just, they understand that some of the members may, but they just think with everything we have in front of us that they don't believe it's appropriate. For example, a planning commission member then appearing before the city council, even though they've abstained at the planning commission, but then appearing before the city council when, members of the public may know, well, that guy's on the planning commission. So they were so once Mike and I heard that kind of message, we didn't feel like it was productive to, pursue that with the entire council. So I just want to let you guys know that provision stands. And it doesn't look like there's any desire to change it, so.
Okay.
So I can't come to municipal court.
If it's for your kid or
That's
family
it.
member,
Okay.
but yeah, not if you're on the planning commission.
Okay.
But the mayor was very sensitive, like he doesn't want to interfere with anybody's business, and if you feel like it does hamper, he's happy to talk to you about, finding a substitute. So it wasn't anything, punitive, it's just an appearance thing. They thought was pretty important.
Anything else? I think we had a motion.
No, motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
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 We're adjourned.